job.
And once again,
Okay.
if anyone wants to contact me at davesgreen@gmail.com, I can get you the files for my presentation.
Uh-oh, is there music on the slideshow? You listen to it the whole time? Or is that somebody's
your
phone?
phone,
Or maybe it's Roberta.
Nice ring, Roberta. Clicker again. Sorry, online folks, I'm not gonna look you in the eye today. There we go. All right. Welcome to week 2, everyone. Thanks for coming, and thanks everyone online. If there's anyone out there in Zoom, I have no idea. It's kind of surreal. All right, garden planting, rotation, and seeds. And the bulk of this, my friends, is going to be rotation, because that's the more complex subject of the 3. Okay. And once again, I'm Dave DeWitt. If any of you don't know, I mean, here most of you know me, but online, if anyone new, been farming in Truro for 35 years now. Certified organic farmer, then non-certified because I don't want to be part of that certification program anymore, but a regenerative agriculturalist. And yeah,
And remind people to send questions at the end.
Yes, send questions at the end. If you add them to the chat, then they'll compile them here at the library and we'll do it at the end, okay? All right, thank you. Here we go. Maybe.
Oh, is it not? Okay. Try it again.
There we go.
There you go.
Planting your garden. Simple, very easy first question, because what do you like to grow? Because why would you grow something you don't like, right? That you don't want to eat, or, unless you're feeding the food pantry or something, or trying to make a living, in which case it's a whole different discussion. But in your garden, and I'd be happy to have that farming discussion if someone would like to have it. What do you like to eat? That's the first thing to do when you're deciding to plant your garden, because that is going to dictate where your garden's location is, when the timing of everything is going to happen, fertility needs, pH needs. If you want to be a blueberry grower, you're not going to adjust the pH. You're going to leave it, at least on Cape Cod, at our 5.4 or 3, whatever we have out there. Okay, so choosing a crop, number 1. I'm going to try to keep this the hour like I'm supposed to, as opposed to last time. So if I'm going too fast, I apologize. Number 2, location. Okay, now that we know what you want to grow, and let's just say for all intents and purposes, you want to grow tomatoes, because it seems to be kind of a thing people like to grow. Okay, tomatoes are a warm, tender crop. They can't be planted too early, and they can't be planted in the shade. Okay, so location's super important to where a tomato would go. Now, let's say you would like to grow some spinach. Spinach is a cool weather crop, and you can actually grow it in the shade in the middle of the summer if it's in the right spot. Same with arugula and some of the other greens. So location is very important to what you want to grow. Now, I would assume the majority of you want to grow a little of everything. It's kind of cucumbers and pickle, or cucumbers and peppers and potatoes and tomatoes and lettuce, et cetera, kale. So we have to find a situation about planting your garden that's going to have the cool season stuff in the beginning of when it's cool, and then the hot crops that love the heat in the middle and the end, and then more cool stuff back in the end again. So location is important. Also, if you have a garden that is in the full sun in one section and in the shade in another, location is important. We'll put the arugula and the spinach in the shade section, and the other part in the other plants that like the sun and the sun. Okay, sun and shade. That was my perfect example. What do you have on your property? If you want to have a garden and you have a lot of trees, then you probably have shade. Full sun is literally full sun. It's like 8 to 10 hours of sun. It's not 6, it's not 4, it's not 3. It's like full 8 to 10 hours of sun. So when I talk full sun, I'm talking really all day long, okay? Everything else, in my opinion, is in the shade. Okay, there's really, with most vegetables, there is, like with flowers, there's a lot of in-betweens, but with vegetables, it's pretty much, they all like the sun. Some of them can't take the heat too much. So if you have the opportunity and you really want to get a nice garden on Cape Cod and you have a lot of trees, maybe cut down a few trees, and then for every one you cut down, plant 2 or 3 more somewhere else that's not in the garden, so that we can keep our soils and our planet going again. Okay, so if you do have to cut some trees down, do it for the sake of your food production, but make sure you replant elsewhere. Cold hardy plants and tender plants. When you're planting your garden, we really have to figure out, particularly when you get to the rotation and stuff, and the location of your garden, what crops are cool crops and what crops are warm-loving crops, okay? And locate them in the right location in the garden. Like I said earlier, if you have some shade, then you're gonna go ahead and keep the things that like the cool stuff. I should have made a chart for you guys, but basically your brassica family, so your broccoli and cabbage and those type of things, and kales and Brussels sprouts, all the brassicas can take parts of, to a little bit of sun and then some shade in the heat of the summer. In the spring, you're going to plant those earlier before you plant everything else, so that hopefully they'll have that crop done. If you can avoid the cabbage worms, by midsummer, we'll be harvesting a lot of those crops, and then you can free that space up for another succession planting. Okay, so grow what you like, find out where it needs to grow by the location on your property, find out what part of that garden is sun and shade, and then make sure you put the plants in the appropriate spots in that garden. That's really as simple as garden planning goes. I mean, we can get down to the nitty gritty and talk about square foot garden and spacing between all that, but all that information is in your seed catalogs. So I would just go to them, and in the back of almost every seed catalog, every one I'm going to explain to you is going to have all that information in it. So I'm not going to get into those details per se. We can, if you have questions at the end, I could certainly answer any more in-depth planning questions, but that's about it. This is what the real important part of this talk for me is. And a lot of your planning questions are going to be answered in this as well. Okay, so crop rotation, very important, very old time traditional method of growing vegetables, field crops, animals, etc. This has been practiced in farming and in gardening and agriculture since the beginning of farmers. So it's not something to be overlooked. Okay, and with the green revolution that happened in the 60s, when the chemical fertilizers and a lot of chemical pesticides really came into, unfortunately, it got the name of green revolution, but that's what it's called. So it's not what you're thinking about today's green revolution when we're trying to have solar and wind and whatever else. But so the green revolution in this case, back in the 50s and 60s, is mainly hybridization of seeds to produce more pounds per acre in conjunction with chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides and fungicides. The combination of those three things, the hybridization of seeds and those other two issues, that created a lot of increase in production on our soils and in our farms. And initially that happened. And then the problems with the green revolution began to unfold. First off, with hybridization of seeds, farmers can no longer share seeds like we do in our seed libraries, right? We can't share seeds with our neighbors because a hybridized seed is no good the next year for the most part, okay? So we lost a lot with the green revolution, pollution, topsoil. I mean, the series goes on. Prior to chemical fertilizers, people were using cover crops, crop rotation, and manuring of their fields to keep their production going and the health of the soil going, which we learned last week is really important. Healthy soil produces healthy plants. So once everyone stopped spreading manure, because it was a lot easier to stop mucking manure into the manure spreader and then driving it around the field with the tractor all day long, it was a lot easier to just pour a bunch of chemical fertilizers. Some 10-10-10 always did good. So why not get 20-20-20? The next thing you know, you get 30-30-30. So the process, when that happened in the 60s, our organic matter content of our soil started to go down, and erosion happened. It went down the streams. The Mississippi River is polluted. The Gulf of Mexico is polluted. All the waters of the oceans and the entire planet is not polluted. Okay, so it's really important to go back to those old timey methods. And on your home garden, what a great opportunity! It's you on your property, no one's telling you what to do. If you're just a home gardener, you're not trying to make a living doing this, so your yields per whatever doesn't really matter. Okay, in the big picture of things, you may want to compete with your neighbors and get the biggest tomato. I admit that I like to win that contest at the ag fair, and I have, but That's another story. Okay, the practice of changing the crop each year on the same piece of ground. Okay, that's the definition I came up with. Okay, rotate plant families to different areas of the garden space, not revisiting a particular area for 5 years. Now, 5 years is my rotation that I like. Okay, when you start to Google crop rotations and vegetable crop rotations, you're going to begin to see a 2-year, a 4-year. A 4-year is kind of a common thing, and you'll see a slide that does have a 4-year. But I throw the 5th year in there because I want to add a green manure crop, and we'll get to that. And we did talk a little bit about green manure last time. All right, crop rotation, disease and pest prevention. Okay, rotation. I need to read it, but basically, when we're what was the back? Rotate plant families. Okay, I'm going to show you, listen a little while of what the plant families are. So, for instance, the nightshade family. Okay, tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, eggplant. Okay, that's a plant family. Okay, so year 1 in our garden plan, we're going to plant tomatoes in this section of the garden. Next year, we're not going to put tomatoes, another nightshade family there. We're going to have something different. Okay, something non-related, because within families of vegetables, a lot of the same pests and diseases in the soil and above ground are only susceptible for that specific crop family. Okay, so if you have some soil-borne organism, let's just say fusarium wilt or fusarium or blight of some sort in your tomatoes, that's a soil-borne organism. Okay, so why would we put the same crop if we had blight, which all of you probably have had, by the way, and myself included? But why would we want to put the same thing that's going to be susceptible there the next year, knowing that it's already there? Okay, so we're going to move it, and then what we can do in that process is we could put something in there that's going to be an antagonistic crop that's going to actually prevent that that pathogen from continuing to grow in that soil, or the pest from continuing in that area. Okay, so we want to rotate our families and keep things in families. Okay, so that's kind of what you have to think about now in this perspective. Okay, okay. So we're going to rotate the plants that are not particularly pathogens and diseases get built up in that area over the years. Okay, over year after year, you're going to start getting the same kind of pests. All right, so we want to rotate by plant families, not just different plants. So it's not, like I said, it's not tomato 1 year and pepper the next, because that's the same plant family. Okay, so we want to make sure that we delineate it. We're separating by families, and you're going to see a slide in a little while that will explain that in a little bit more detail. Okay, does everyone understand that? Okay, good. So we're going to rotate our crops, and we'll talk about the plan in a little bit to help reduce disease and pest pressures. Ultimately, eliminating them is the goal here, right? So that we don't have to have a lot of worms and everything else, and aphids and all the other things that everyone gets. Okay, so keep them different plant families mixed up, and that will help. Improvement of soil fertility. So this is the real benefit that I see. The pest is important, but this is where I really start to see I see benefit of rotation on my farm. Okay, so different crops have different nutrient needs, and they also have different functional root growth in the way they grow. Some have long roots that can go deep. Some have short, shallow roots. Okay, so ideally, we want to move things around so where that a crop that has a shallow feeding system is following one with a long root system that's pulling nutrients up to the shallow areas of that part of the soil. So it's mining the nutrients down below, and it's bringing them up to the top so that the next crop, let's say lettuce, for instance, which is a pretty shallow rooted plant, can then grab all those nutrients that are down below, that if you keep growing lettuce in the same place, there's all these nutrients down there you're not getting. Okay, so by mixing up the crops and rotating different crops, you're going to pull and utilize nutrients from the bottom that of the root zone that can't be attached. Okay, so by rotating, and also some plants like more nitrogen, some plants like more phosphorus and potassium than others. Okay, So if you keep growing potatoes in the same area, your potassium levels are going to go down there. So we want to move that and rotate it around to an area so that something else can come in that doesn't need so much phosphorus until that phosphorus gets built back up with our composting and our manuring and stuff like that, okay? Or our fertilizers. Of course, once again, side note, I'm an organic farmer, always been one. Whenever I talk about fertilizers or pesticides or anything, unless I specifically say conventional synthetic ones, I'm meaning organic fertilizers, okay? And there are a whole bunch of them out there. Okay, inclusion of leguminous crops and green manures in the rotation help add nitrogen to the soil. And I made a note here, this is a must for us on Cape Cod. So that's why I have the 5-year rotation plan, because if we break our garden up into sections, one of those sections every year, you've heard of fallow fields. Well, this is a very similar thing. The fallow field is not going to be just weeds and let it grow, sit with whatever comes up. It's going to be intentionally planted with a leguminous crop, okay? A vetch, a clover, there's lots of them, alfalfa. There's many, many leguminous plants, okay? Peas, beans, field peas. There's a lot of things. Hairy vetch is my favorite. It produces the most nitrogen and biomass. So that area that you're planting in leguminous crop, that part of the rotation, is not going to grow any food. So nothing's going to be taken up, and anything that's taken up from the crop, you're going to be turning back under, and all those nutrients, and particularly the nitrogen, because leguminous plants have the wonderful ability to take nitrogen from the air and put it into the plant for free. No need to go through any excessive biology in the soil, because there's one very specific bacteria called rhizobia that's attached to the root system of all legume plants to some degree, some more than others. The rhizobia bacteria are able to take atmospheric nitrogen, process it into a usable plant form, and it's right in the roots. They grow on the roots of the plant, and that brings and feeds the plant. So all the green clover, all the your bean plants, your soybeans, your peas, all that green you're seeing there, all that nitrogen and that green is coming from the atmosphere if everything's in your soil is doing well and the rhizobia are fostered. And you can actually inoculate the seeds, and we do that with our bean and soybean and pea seeds that we buy from our various seed sources. We'll buy the inoculant, we'll mix it up. It's usually like a black powder type thing. It's the rhizobia bacteria. You shake it up and then you plant it. So it's kind of this kind of sticky, gross stuff, but you plant it in your garden. Then that bacteria is surrounding the root or surrounding the seed. As soon as that root comes out, boom, the bacteria is there. Okay, so vetch is an amazing, hairy vetch is what I use. And it has an amazing amount of rhizobia per square whatever of the root system, and really can fix a lot of nitrogen and also produce a lot of biomass that then you're going to till under. So we're getting all this free nitrogen, then we're going to till it back into the soil. It's also taking up the phosphorus and the potassium and the boron and the magnesium and all the other things that the plant needs to grow, but that's all going to be returned back to the soil again. And also with the vetch, it's one of those mining ones, so you can go down really deep and get those potassium and all those minerals and nutrients down there deep and bring it up, and then we till that crop in. The following crop would make sense to have a nitrogen-loving crop, i.e. greens, salad greens, okay, lettuce, something that really likes a lot of nitrogen, doesn't produce fruit, needs a lot of nitrogen. Well, if you follow the next year with that crop, boom, all the nitrogen is right there. Okay, so that you're beginning to see the concept here of what we want to get accomplished here. Benefit the soil, benefit the crops that are following, and try to break disease and pest pressures. And as we see later, weed pressures too. So inclusion of leguminous crops and green manure, I'm sorry, is kind of redundant. A green manure is a leguminous crop. Okay, oh, no, I'm saying. Leguminous crop is something like the peas or the beans or soybeans that you would eat, okay, where you're going to take the pods of that plant and eat it, okay, seed pods. So that's why it's broken up. That's why I broke it up. Now I'm remembering. So a very typical 4-season rotation plan, which a lot of gardeners use. That leguminous crop is the crop you're going to eat, the string beans and the fava beans and the soybeans and other things, the edamame. Okay, so those are the difference. Green manures are like the hairy vetch and the clover and things like that. You're not going to be getting anything out of that. I do a 4-year plan with the 5th year added for my green manure crop, but I'm still using that 4th section for my peas and beans. So I'm doing the traditional 4-year thing, but I'm adding a year. So I'm breaking my field up or my garden or my beds up into 5 instead of 4. Okay. All right. So rotation preserves and improves soil structure. It brings stuff up from mines nutrients. The roots can go deeper, opens up the soil structure. And the rotation is the difference. Instead of having the same crop in the same area all the time, you're getting different production from the plant roots. And that's the next section is the exudate production. Okay. Exudates, if you remember from last week, is I'm not going to get into it yet, but it's the amazing cookie batter that's produced by the roots that tell the organisms in the soil, particularly the fungus, and feeds them and tells them, and it's a communication system between the microorganisms in the soil and the plant. It's a natural process been going on for evolution. So exudate production is increased on gardens that are following a rotation system. And the types of exudates are also being, every year you're moving crops around, so they're getting a buildup of things in there that are a little bit different. Okay. All right. So that will increase the soil microbiology, what I call, after Dr. Elena Ingham, who's everyone should learn about, coined the soil food web, is what we're talking about. All that stuff that goes on under the soil, the exudates, the microorganisms, the bacteria, the yeast, the diatoms and protozoas are all what the whole thing is, the machine that runs the whole thing. Okay. Above ground, the only reason we're alive is because of the soil food web. Okay. So we need to foster the soil food web at all times. And if we can do that with crop rotation, that just adds to the thing we learned last week about soils, mulch, and compost. Just more reasons, more ways to increase and mimic nature and to work in unison with nature. Okay. All right. Sorry if I'm going fast. Weed control. When we start to do some crop rotation, we begin to break the cycle of certain weeds because some things are, well, if we put a green manure crop, we're going to smother weeds that way. If we have a crop that's like lettuce and that can smother weeds that way, different weed seeds will only germinate if it has the right sun and the right moisture levels. So by breaking up with other crops, not being the same thing over year, you're going to slow down that production of various weeds and hopefully start to break the cycles. Folks, if you let your weeds go to seed, okay, you're in trouble. Okay, so it's really imperative that you mulch your gardens and keep your seeds from going to flower. Okay, you need to weed your garden. As soon as you get a weed seeds, you're in it for a minimum of 10 more years. Those weeds are going to be there. Okay, and certain things like chickweed and what's that one that spits out the seeds? Shepherd's person. I can't remember her name. You know that one that you touch in the spring and all those seeds shoot out? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay, well that one, those seeds are super hard. They'll live in the soil for like decades. Every time you till the soil with the rototiller, you're tilling lots of them up. If you're broad forking and hand tilling, you're doing a little bit less. So I encourage you to do that. Okay, but yeah, so we want to break the cycle of weeds by moving different crops, different sections of your garden. Okay, trying to keep things mixed up the way nature does it. Okay, nature doesn't monocrop. It doesn't grow the same thing in one spot all the time. So we need to mimic nature. Okay. All right. Cost savings. This is one that I, was reading about. I was like, yeah, you know what? It's true. If we get everything in sync and we're cranking, our fertilization costs are going to go down. Our pest costs are going to go down, and disease costs are going to go down because we're breaking those pest cycles and those disease cycles. If you use herbicides, your herbicide costs are going to go down. Now, if you're hand weeding and you can break the weed cycle, or you're hand picking your tomato worms off your tomatoes, all those labor savings in my situation as a farmer add up. Like I really need to keep my weeding, my field crew not weeding too much, which is unfortunate for them. That's all they do. But fertilizer costs. If I could not add nitrogen fertilizer because part of my rotation, my heavy feeders are following my green manure, the medium feeders are coming next, and then the light feeders next. So I'm able to cut down my fertilizer needs by doing this rotation. Okay, and in essence, fertilizers, insecticides, insect control and disease control, it's expensive. You know, as a farmer, it's going to cost me money, okay, to go out to Bayberry and buy something, or wherever I get it. I don't get it at Bayberry, but wherever you're going to get it locally here. Okay, so let's, I threw cost savings in there as a little bit of an added bonus to affect the pocketbook, because sometimes, you know, if you have some money buy-in, you buy into a concept a little bit better. All right, developing a crop rotation plan. All right, there is a lot of information on the internet. Okay, I'm going to share with you a book by L.A. Coleman that you'll see up here in a little bit. But this book, and you probably can't see because it's dark, but it's L.A. Coleman's The New Organic Grower. It's been around for quite a while, since the 80s sometime probably. A very nice man. I've sat with him on a lot of different panels and workshops, and I've had personal dinners with him and his wife, and he's a very delightful person. And if you Google L.A. Coleman, you are going to get an incredible amount of information, and you're going to learn about winter growing in New England. I grow plants in the middle of winter in Cape Cod or anywhere in New England. He's in Maine without heat. So I highly suggest you check out L.A. Coleman. He's an amazing teacher of mine and a friend. All right, so crop rotation. We need to come up with a plan and some basics, okay, that we want to follow. All right. All right, so you want to get the veggies that you want to grow, and you want to put them in, make a list, and you want to put them into families. A lot of you are going to have that nightshade family, okay? So if that's the case, then get ready to move gardens in different locations and just grow your nightshades all in one spot. If you want to do a mix of things, which, you know, cucumbers and obviously beans, and there's some squash and zucchini and things that people love to grow. So break it up by families, get your list. Now we're talking about your plan, your list. Get your list and make a little chart. And over here, you're gonna have all the families, everyone's gonna be broken out, because we're gonna use that in a minute, okay? Number 2, divide your garden into equal sections according to how many years the rotation is to last. In my case, it's 5 years. I can't tell you what to do, but I would make a suggestion that, at least on Cape Cod, get that green manure crop in there on the 5th year. Your garden will be happy, the soil will be happy. Yes, you're gonna not have any food there for a little bit, but think about the food, the microorganisms in the soil, because you're gonna feed them like crazy. All right, so it doesn't matter if your garden's 100 feet long or you have 5 small gardens or whatever you want to do. How you want to break it up into sections, okay? If it's just one long bed, break it up into sections. If it's only 2 feet on each section, so be it, okay? We're going to make it, if it's smaller garden, whatever the case is, divide it, in my case, by 5. I say minimum by 4, okay? All right. Decide on a method to track your veggie planting from one year to the next. Rotation means nothing if you throw the scrap piece of paper away that you had jotted it all down and you didn't put plant markers and plant anything. And this is going to go to another great point that I should have had in the garden planning. Notes, 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 okay? Take notes from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, okay? And on the other flip side, take soil samples at least once a year if you're a professional grower, twice a year, okay? So notes and soil tests are critical, okay, to know what's going on. We want to know which varieties do well. We want to take notes. Did that heirloom tomato produce lots of vegetative growth and then give me 2 tomatoes that then split and rotted and tasted like crap, okay? Let's take a note and not grow those again, okay? So you need a method to track all of this, and you really need a method to track the rotation, okay? I'm a little anal, and I was brought up with Excel, so in spreadsheets, you know, so I do a lot of Excel spreadsheets. There are apps available. I mean, it's incredible what's out there now. I actually didn't realize how much was out there because I haven't researched this until my talk today. So I did a little Googling and I was like, wow, this has changed a lot since 1986 and 7 when I started doing this. So when I met L.A. Coleman and started using his methods, basically. All right, so come up with a track system. Elliot Coleman does this cool thing, and I'm going to give you a brief thing where he uses note cards, okay? And you put the word onion on the note card. You put the word tomato on the note card, and then you start playing the game, and you figure out with these note cards and you come up with a visual thing. And that is how I started. That came out of the New Organic Grower. It's an amazing way of visualizing what you're doing. You can put them in you can draw a picture of a garden and you can put the notebooks in your garden. This is your right? And oh, there's shade over here. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about mentioned shade, I'm sorry to go back, but if you have a new garden and you're not paying attention, taking notes every year like you're going to do now that I've told you that, you need to know like where parts of your garden is sun and shade and how many hours you're getting here and there. There's an amazing resource out there. It's called Google Earth Pro. I believe it's still free. Get that on your computer and you can go back to the archive and you can go back many years and then you can add the dates and you can go from the whole year and add the dates and you can watch the sun shade line on your property move across your property. It's phenomenally cool. And when I have my landscape customers, I have to do this so I can, because they're like, oh, I have full sun. And then I go pull up the Google Earth and I go back 10 years and I watch year after year what really happens over the course of a year. And they end up having like barely any sun. So with the Google Earth and then the time date, you can go through the seasons and see, and particularly if you're going to become a winter grower, you want to see how much sun you actually get on that garden with the low sun levels and with no leaves on the tree. And then on the flip side, in the summer, you want to see how many, looking at the sun right now is good and important to write it down, but it's irrelevant for summer production, okay? Because you might have sun right now in your garden because all the oak trees and all the deciduous trees don't have any leaves. So that's going to come around, right? So you want to do a little investigative research, and you can actually do that with Google Earth Pro. I think you have to have, not the regular Google Earth, but the Google Earth Pro. And anyone just email me and I'll explain you how to do it. It's a pretty simple thing, but you need a little technical, computer savvy. Okay, so track it, get yourself together, know in your which card's going to go where, how you're going to place, don't put spinach somewhere where it's just always super sunny in the spring. If you're not, it's not going to work. Okay, so you've got a lot of factors here involving in your garden plan and your rotation plan. So you kind of have to start to synthesize all this together. Okay, so decide on a method to track. Excel is good for me. It might not be good for you. And there are a lot of apps. I can't even believe what I saw on the internet this morning when I was finalizing all this stuff. All right. And I apologize. I'm stealing things from the internet, and it's really quite awful. I guess I should have scaled it down. There are your members of your common vegetables. I think most of you are going to grow these things. Okay, I'm sure salsa feed's not on there, which I grow, and celeriac's not on there, right? But I know that they're root crops. Okay, so we're going to talk about that in a minute. So there is your families. Okay, the Nebraska crucifer family, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, kohlrabi, radish, turnips. Okay, that's all one family. Okay, and there's your allium family. I'm not going to go into all the Latin names, but your chive, garlic, leek, and onions. Okay, where did I get this from? I just grabbed it off the internet. I just typed up when I typed up crop rotation on Google, and then I did images. It just 10,000 different images that come up and different plans and 8-year plans and 10-year rotations and rotations with chickens. I mean, it's like insane amount of information. The internet sometimes still blows me away, even though it's been this long. Okay, I want you to notice one thing: the beet family. Okay, the Sinopian family: beets, spinach, and Swiss chard. Okay, they're all in that same family. Okay, I'm sure you can kind of think about it by the above growing pound, right? And then when you look at the seed, that's the real, that's the crux of this family, is the type of seed. So they're all very similar. That spinach seed is a little bit different than the beet and the Swiss chard, but they're pretty similar. Okay, Solanaceae family, i.e. the nightshade family, eggplant, peppers, potato, and tomato, and then your carrots, celery, dill, fennel, parsley, and parsnips are on there. There's your squash family: cucumber, melon, pumpkins, and squash.
What about basil? What's that like?
Basil is in its own family, and I don't know the name of it right now. It's not coming to me. It's not enough of a pest/disease problem where I would be concerned about it. And actually, when I do multi-cropping, and so I grow tomatoes, and then underneath them I grow lettuce or carrots. Okay, I might do a row of onions, and then in between I might do a row of radishes between it. I'm trying to mix up the diversity of the roots and the exudates so that I can really maximize my soil structure and what's going on with the soil. But the other thing that, if you remember from last week's talk, and if you weren't there, I apologize, but remember I had that talk about always keeping the ground covered, So it's either, your bed is either mulched with a living mulch, like a green manure, or the plant is living while the tomato plant is growing out of it. Or in my case, keeping it covered with other things. Remember I said alyssum, thyme, okay? Basil can fit into that rotation. So basil and a lot of the herbs don't really have enough pest or disease issues to be a worry for the crop following it. So you can kind of intermix them all around on the edges of your garden where it might get more sun in some situations. Basil is a good example, loves full sun. So if you have a tall crop that the back part of the crop, let's just say corn, not that we grow a lot of corn on Cape Cod, look, tomatoes. So you got a 6 foot tall brandywine tomato. Behind it is going to be a lot of shade, okay? That would be a good place to put some spinach in the middle of summer or some arugula that's not going to like the full sun. In the front of that, okay, facing the sun would be a good spot to put the basil, okay? Does everyone understand that? At least the people here. And if you don't online, once again, email me and ask me questions or ask in the chat, okay? So very good question with the basil, whoever said that. But there's your general stuff. You can get more specific. There's a lot of information on the internet, as I mentioned. There's your families. Okay, so now you've got your list of your families, and you're going to categorize them and put them all on your list. Okay. Okay, this is from Elliot's book. Okay, and I apologize. I didn't know how to get it, the JPEG on there, but I couldn't. I scanned it and it didn't run. So this is for an 8-year plan because that's where his world is at. Okay. So in my case, I would have A, B, C, D, E, and A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, those 5 would be my system. Okay, so as you can see, the rotation scheme, A, let's just say a light feeder, B would be a medium feeder, C would be a heavy feeder, D would be my green manure crop, and E would go back again to another light feeder, or I might throw my beans in there somewhere. But basically that's the gist. Okay, so you're gonna have a rotation scheme like this. Of course, your garden might not be square like that, it might be round or whatever, but the essence, the principle is the same. Okay, get your families and get them together, families first, and then we're going to talk about which ones need higher food and not. Okay, and then bend it in your mind on the bottom of this slide here. Okay, because you got to look at it from that rotation too. Okay, so you really got to catch that back flip side. Okay, so this, and then there is some good stuff about space and time up there. Everything in his book is great. So I really suggest that you read Elliot Coleman's A New Organic Gardener. It's like something about the, I can't remember. It's going to say something about growing whatever techniques for the market gardener, which is a small micro farm like mine on Cape Cod, like all of ours in Truro and Wellfleet, and then I know of in East Ham and Orleans, et cetera, et cetera. But that's more akin to your garden. So everything he says in here can be attributed and put in place in your place. Don't be scared away by the word market gardener, okay? Because it's just a term, and you can scale down to your whatever, even if you're doing a container garden, okay? You can still scale it down. So read it, check it out. Okay, now the nuts and the cookies here. Here we go. Okay. One thing, I apologize. This is a 4-season rotation because that is the most common one you're going to come across. Okay. So garden bed 1, plant the legumes. Okay. In this case, we're talking about the pods that we eat. Okay. Your snap peas, your beans. Okay. That kind of stuff. These will grow in soil of average fertility. Okay. And they will leave traces of nitrogen in the soil, which will be used by crops that succeed them. Okay. So, number 2, garden bed 2, okay? Plant leafy green vegetables, okay? Like I said earlier, those of which eat where we eat the leaf, i.e. spinach, lettuce, arugula, these kind of things, okay? mosh, all the ones I love, like things, the greens I grow, a lot of on my farm. And where you eat the leaf, okay, that's the key thing to remember. Okay, it's not like a leafy broccoli plant that then we eat the flower of the broccoli. Okay, I'm talking about just the leaves. Okay, these need high levels of nitrogen to grow fast and sweet. Okay, sweet's a relative term, but lettuce can be sweet if you think about it. Spinach can be sweet compared to like a bitter brassica of something else. Okay, so the high nitrogen need is followed by your bean crop. In my case, it might also be followed by my green manure crop. Okay, actually, for me, the leafy green is followed by my green manure crop. Okay, I really want to get those leafy greens in there. Okay, all right, bed number 3 of our rotation: plant vegetables that produce edible fruit. These require a humus-rich soil with a balanced fertility. Okay, so not too high nitrogen, not too kind of in the middle. Okay, so the good news is that's a lot of what you want to grow. Okay, that's all the squashes, that's all your eggplants and your peppers, and it's just so much. Okay, is fruit that you want to eat. Okay, a lot of the plants, the eggplants, the cucumbers, there's so much that's going to go into that bed. And unfortunately, when you start to put out your families and look at those situations, you're going to find that that's going to be the trickiest part of your design. Okay, bed number 4. Okay, is your root vegetables. Plant your root vegetables, those that produce an edible root or tuber or a rhizome, the underground part of the plants. These require less of the nutrient nitrogen, okay, but more potassium for good growth. So I'm assuming you can get the next guess of year 5. So this is going to take the least amount of nitrogen following your manure crop. So what's going to come over here is going to be back to that leguminous crop again, okay, so that you can rebuild the nitrogen again, because it's now been depleted from the year when the edible fruits were there, and then from when the greens were there. They've depleted the nitrogen, but these root crops don't need that much nitrogen. Okay, they need a lot of potassium and phosphorus. Okay, all right. So, what are your legume vegetables? Beans, your climbing beans, dwarf, all of your peas, broad beans, fava beans. Please grow more fava beans. The roots go so deep in the soil and mine nutrients and water from deep down there. They bring up microorganisms. And if you've ever had the Portuguese fava beans in your life, and this, when I got to Cape Cod in the mid 80s, they were everywhere. A lot of restaurants had them, and you don't see them anymore, ever, anywhere, where it used to be a whole different thing. So please, let's bring locally here, let's bring back the fava bean. Everyone grow it. If you have extra, Michael Ciraldi at Ciraldi Restaurants will buy everything you have, all the fava beans that are extra. Okay, it's so good for the soil, and it's an amazing crop. And if you have any friends with any Portuguese relatives or anything in there, I bet you have a recipe for it, Roberta. Yes, yeah. So people that have been around the Cape for a while know, and I've only been here 35 years, but I've had the Portuguese fava beans, and everyone should grow fava beans. So don't overlook the broad beans, okay? Lima beans, there's a whole bunch of them, okay? They're taller, they have bigger root systems, okay? It's a great plant to grow. Leafy greens, obviously, lettuce, chard, cabbage, celery, Chinese greens. When you talk about the brassicas, I have up to 32 ingredients in my salad mix. That's what I'm kind of known for, my incredible variety. Mustards and this, and I mean, there's so many different things, okay, that the leafy greens can cover. And one I want to add to that is cress. Everyone should grow cress. Fruity vegetables, tomatoes, chilies, chili and capsicum, that's the same thing. Corn, cucumbers, eggplant, squash, pumpkins, melons. So much of what you want to eat are those fruity crops, okay, the fruity vegetables. And then obviously root vegetables is simple. Turnips. Oh, look, they got a bunch of good ones in there. Beets, carrots, onions, radish, potatoes. Those are our main ones. Salsify is great if you want to grow that. Celeriac or celery root, people want to call it. Parsnips, parsley root. Okay. Different than growing parsley. Parsley root is a different seed. Okay. So you move the last crop around, and then it goes back around in a circle. Okay. Perennial crops that take more than 1 or 2 years to move cycle, that's a tough one. Okay. You kind of have to either have a separate location for that or just dedicate this part of my garden and give it an extra, instead of having 4 or 5 sections, you want to have a 6th section where, like, let's say, because really strawberries are great for like 3 to 5 years and then they're done. So have a section for strawberries and then have that be a green manure crop or a compost section later. So perennial crops are a little bit more difficult, but I encourage you to grow them because they're perennials and they're really good. Asparagus, rutabaga, rhubarb, there are other good ones. And well, fruits, of course, but mainly strawberries. We won't get into other fruits, but strawberries I can is a kind of short-term thing. Okay, does everyone understand that in this room at least? All right, good. All right, so that's the gist of it, guys, right there. Break it up into families. Okay, break up your garden into sections, minimum 4. If you're only growing 2 crops, then you only have 2. So you go back and forth. If I was you, I'd have a high nutrient, try to do it. But I would try to break it up into 4. Most of you are going to want to break it up into 4 because those are the 4 things you're going to want to grow. Those are the 4 types of crops you're going to want to grow. So that's the way it's going to be. All right, so that is it for crop rotation, I believe. Yeah, seeds. Okay, we got 10 minutes left, and that's about all the time I need for seeds and a couple questions. And direct sow them, you mean? Yes, yeah, I have done that a lot. Yeah, I used to do that a lot, but now I do each individual. The question, if you didn't hear that on the internet, was do I plant different types of lettuce seeds together so I'd have a mix? I mean, you can buy the mixes too at all these seed companies, but I personally separate them because they have slightly different crop needs and harvest periods. So I like to fine tune it because that's my specialty, is Dave's Greens, my farm name. So, all right, with seeds, generally speaking, there are 2 types. There's heirloom seeds, okay, and then there's hybrid seeds, okay. Hybrid seeds are a cross between 2 cultivars. It gets hybridized. You can get something called hybrid vigor, which is great. You get a lot of yield and production. It's the majority of the seeds out there are hybridized seeds that you're going to find in the world. Of course, the heirloom and open pollinated. So an heirloom plant, the word heirloom is kind of a tough word to go with vegetables in some ways, but it basically stands for like vegetables that have been passed on through time, like your antique dining room table you may have in your house. Okay, so that's the kind of general theory behind the word heirloom, but really what we should be saying is open pollinated. Okay, something that hasn't been bred, hybridized in hybrid breeding programs to come up with F1, F2 hybrids and F3 hybrids. What we're talking about is something that's open pollinated. Okay, and if you're going to collect seeds, that makes it difficult. So that'll be that's a whole other class. So heirloom seeds are open pollinated seeds. You hear a lot about heirloom tomatoes, Brandywine, all the yummy, tasty ones. And yes, they were passed on because of flavor and color and texture and all that stuff. They weren't grown and bred for shipping from California or Chile or Mexico to Cape Cod. Okay, they were grown and the seeds were passed on because they were open pollinated. When you passed on the seed to your neighbor and gave him some of this great corn you grew this year, and you grow it again. And the nice thing about open pollinated and sharing seeds is that it gets a localized character and flavor to the thing. So that those seeds and plants, that corn can get acclimated, or that tomato get acclimated to your environment, because that's really important. Is our microclimate is more important than California's microclimate or Maine's microclimate. Okay, so I suggest you get open pollinated where you can, but you can't always get it. And then sometimes there's a crop that's out there that's just so darn good. Okay, let's come up with a burgundy purple string bean, hybridized, awesome plant. I'm growing it. It's a great plant, and you get a lot of that happens. Okay, so that's the difference between heirloom and hybrid. Heirloom's open pollinated. Hybrid goes through a rigorous breeding program and makes F1 hybrids, F2, F3. You can look into that stuff if you really want to delve into it. But just know that there's 2 types of seeds. If you get something from an heirloom seed catalog, you should hope, like Baker Creek, you should hope that it's going to be all open pollinated stuff. Okay, treated seeds versus untreated. I'm an organic farmer. I don't get a treated seed, but sometimes you're going to order something, particularly if it was corn or maybe a squash, and you'll order from a seed company like traditional kind of old fashioned, not old fashioned, but a traditional seed company that was very involved in the Green Revolution. And you get these seeds, you open up the packet and they're pink or they're bright orange or bright green. And you're like, what the? That's a fungicide. And they put a fancy color in there so because it wouldn't have a color if it didn't. But that's a fungicide. Okay, that's a treated seed. That seed has got a fungicide around the roots, and it's not the same as the rhizobia bacteria. It's actually quite the opposite. So it's used so that when that seed germinates, it kills off all the fungi and all the potential pathogens in the soil that will make that seed rot before it can germinate. So if you're a big farmer and you're planting 100 acres of, let's say, soybeans or corn, and it's kind of a cool, wet spring, you're going to want a treated seed so that the soil, because the soil is kind of moist, the seed, you might spend $10,000 on seed and put it on your field. And if it all rots, you're kind of bumming. All right. So modern technology from the 60s created these pesticides and fungicides. So they put them on the seeds. Okay. Totally wrong in many, many ways, but particularly for the organic gardener. Okay. No reason for a home gardener to have treated seeds. So make sure that they're not. And they won't always tell you. Okay. So if you need to and you have any questions, call the seed company and say, I don't want treated seeds. Check over my order, make sure there's no treated seeds on here. Okay. Untreated's the way to go, people. Naked, true seeds. That's what we want. Okay. Now we're talking seeds. We're in the Northeast. If any of you are logging in from somewhere else, you're going to put in your thing. The Midwest, the Northwest, the Southwest, whatever the case may be, put in your geographic location. I like to get my seeds from seed companies that do their trial gardens and their trialing of these seeds in your general region. Okay. I want something that can grow in Maine in a zone 5 or 4. We're a zone 7B here in Cape Cod. When I started farming, by the way, we were zone 5. Do we have global warming? I don't know. We're now zone 7B. Okay. So now, and that means your last frost-free date. That's what that whole thing matters. So yes, the climate's changing and we can change with it, but I want a good hardy plant if I'm going to grow in New England, right? So I go to Maine. That's where I typically go. Okay. Because that's where the hardy breeds are up there in Maine. Okay. So when you're finding seeds from a source, try to find a source if possible. That's not always possible because they don't have what you want. Okay. Particularly for me in my tomato world. Okay. So find a seed company, a seed source that kind of does trial gardens and test the things that you're going to want to put in your garden that it will work. Okay. Not all seed companies are going to do trial gardens. Okay. So it's very specific. Okay. And the only way to do is to open up their catalog, look at what they say. And I'll tell you right now, these are the seed companies that I use. Okay. This is a very short list of seed companies. There are a bazillion seed companies, and there are many I didn't put on this list because I get a lot of seeds from Asia and New Zealand and other places, okay, in the UK, that I'm not going to just throw on here right now because I'm running out of time anyways. All right, these are the seed companies I use, okay? Johnny Selected Seeds, Albion, Maine. Trial gardens galore. I would trial for them. They would send me, I got involved in market gardening and farming when the beginning of the mescaline craze was happening, the salad mix craze. So I started working with Ken Fine of Johnny Selected Seeds, who's still my guy. And he would send me a new crop of seeds saying, you want to trial this for us? And let's know how it does in Cape Cod in the sand. We're trialing up here in Maine. Just give us some notes. So I was fortunate enough to be part of some of these trial gardening stuff, as I was also done with the Tomato Fest in California, the tomato guy. So an amazing trial gardens. If it grows in Albion, Maine, it's going to grow here. Everything on their catalog, 100% of the plants and flowers and herbs that they're telling you you can grow are going to grow for you. Johnny Selected Seeds, great. Prices are going up everywhere, so I'm a little upset about that, but they're a great company. The next best company for me, number 2, Fedco Seeds. You can flip them back and forth, and you can do Fedco or whatever, and Johnny's. Fedco does a lot of trialing, great company. They have the best catalog, hands down. It's not glossy, it's like recyclable, it's not colorful ink, and it's got a nice new cover every year that makes a great coloring book for your young kids if you have young kids, or if you don't. They used to have contests where you would color them in and then send them in, and they would give you free seeds for whoever the winner was. So it's a great coloring book. Fedco Seeds, amazing company, a lot of open pollinated stuff. They have moose tubers for your potato people and garlic and other stuff. They've got a tree thing if you want fruit trees, a lot of heirloom, old fashioned heritage fruit trees through Fedco. Amazing company, also in Maine, not too far from Johnny's Seeds. The guy from Fedco, is it Fedco? The guy from Fedco used to live at Cornwall Beach at a house. I think it was the guy, or maybe it was the guy from Johnny's. One of those two guys, house at Cornell, as you come to the end before you take the sharp right, straight ahead. Lived there for many years. Baker Creek, I think it's Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, actually. I apologize. I just kind of was rushing getting this done, but Baker Creek, amazing company, a lot of old fashioned, cool old things from all around the world. Amazing seeds, amazing people, phenomenal information. All three of these guys have great information. I'm not getting into like planting seeds today too much, right? Because it's in the seed catalogs, you know, spacing and all that kind of stuff, and how many seeds per row and all that stuff. Johnny's has an amazing bunch of information. Fedco, go on those catalogs. It's like how to grow. They'll teach you how to grow everything just from their catalog. Particularly Johnny's is extremely good. Baker Creek, also really good. All three of those are really great information. Okay. Tomato Fest, you get to it, tomatofest.com. Okay. Well, go there and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. This guy is all about, he also runs the Tomato Fest. I think that's how the name got started. The largest tomato festival in California, in Carmel, California, where he wins a lot of contests. But he's an amazing guy who just pulls together genetics in cultivars from all around the world and all different growers and synthesizes it and trials it and sees how they do and then offers and then grows them out and then offers them for you to buy. And then he has a sale, which are the ones I typically get because I'm kind of that kind of guy. But go to tomatofest.com and you're going to be blown away. And if you need tomatoes and you want to try something cool and funky, you're not going to find it in a lot of these other things. Everyone's going to have a different varieties of things. Maybe you're getting a couple of tomatoes from Johnny's, wherever. Hands down, I go to Tomato Fest pretty much all the time. If I want, like, I'm not going to get a Sun Gold tomato, which is the best cherry tomato in my opinion. It's a hybrid, by the way. It's not an heirloom. It's the only tomato plant. I'm growing 53 varieties of tomatoes this year for sale in May, and only one of them is going to be a hybrid, and they're all heirlooms. It's always Sun Gold because it's the best. If I grow, let's just say 10 brandy wines for sale of heirlooms, I have to grow 100 Sun Golds. That's the demand I have for Sun Golds. Okay, little info. But I'm not buying Sun Golds at Tomato Fest because those seeds are expensive. Annie's Rare Seeds, another really good one. I think Territorial Seeds is my favorite from when I lived out west. So if anyone's tuning in from out west, there's your Territorial Seeds prop, a great, amazing company, also catalog full of information, okay? All right, that is the quick thing about where to get your seeds. Stay away from treated seeds. Make sure you get seed companies that are at least trialing in your area. Heirlooms, open pollinated, the way to go, particularly if you want to save seeds. Hybridization's fine if you need to go there. Starting seeds, real quick, guys, because I don't want to, this is a whole class in itself. There's a lot of things we could talk about, but number one is your environment, okay? Are you going to start your seeds indoor or outdoors? If it's indoors, you got to mimic what they want, okay? What the plant wants to grow, okay? So that's the tricky part. Typically, if you put some seeds on the window of a sunny window, it's not enough light, okay? If you're going to go indoor and start your seeds, you need to get some T5 or T5 fluorescent lights, relatively cheap, or if you want to get super expensive, get some LED grow lights, or you want to get some high pressure sodium and high halide lights, go for it, okay? And they're useful for many crops indoors, by the way. Germination soil temp, that's the key to starting your seeds, okay? If that seed needs to be cool for the seed to germinate, then don't put it on a heating mat because it's going to be too hot. Needs to be cool, okay? If it needs to be hot, i.e. tomatoes at like 65 or 68 degrees soil temperature to germinate, don't put it give it a heating mat, give it some heat, put it on top of a refrigerator where it's kind of heat, okay? Once it germinates, you can back off on the temperature. But to get that germination, you got to kind of go with the environment the plant wants. And if it needs that soil temperature to germinate, that's the key for why people fail with soil germination. They take a string bean and they put it out in their garden the last week of April or something, because it's been sunny day, right? It's been sunny for a week. Oh, the weather's great. It's been wonderful. Guess what? Your soil is still cold. It takes soil a long time to warm up. We can be blazing sun in Cape Cod, ready to jump in the ocean in April, yet the soil is cool, okay? You got to wait till May 15th to put that stuff in the ground, okay? It's not going to germinate. And you know what's going to happen? Because it's not treated, it's going to rot. And then the slug's going to eat it. And then the vole's going to come and get it. And then, God, you know, all the other things are going to come get it, okay? So germination, soil temp, the environment, matching the environment, number one. Number two, germination, soil temp. Number three, soil mix, okay? If you got clay soil and you stick a seed in it, it's going to have a hard time germinating. You got to add organic matter to get your clay more loose and friable and better health and a better tilth, better health, okay? If you're in Cape Cod, it's going to dry out too quick if it's just outdoors in the sand, okay? So if we're doing indoors, whatever the case may be, you want a nice, good soil mix that can hold a little water, drain properly, not too fast, not too slow, okay? Potting soil mix, they sell germination mix, okay? You can make your own germination mix by getting some regular potting soil, putting it in one of those sifters, hand sifters, sift it. Now you have germination mix. Or you can spend extra money and buy the germination mix or make your own. Water, the seeds need water to germinate, okay? Some needs more than less. That brings us back to the environment. If it's outdoor, you don't have to water as much because the soil, right? If it's an indoor potting soil, it's going to drain quicker, and then you're going to have the dryness of the air, and the little pot's going to dry quicker. So you're going to have a little more water. It goes back to environment, number one. Light and darkness for germination. Some plants need light to germinate, okay? Scabiosa, great example. There's a whole bunch of flowers that need light. If it's a good seed company, i.e. everyone I put on there, okay, it's going to tell you when you get the seed pack at home and the back, you're going to read the directions and say plant on the surface because plants need light to germinate. You're not going to bury it if it needs light, okay? Very important, folks. If it needs darkness, bury the damn thing. But generally speaking, if it doesn't need light, you want to plant a seed. The general thing I learned in my studies and teachings is it's a quarter of the seed's diameter. So have you ever seen a kale seed, right? What's a quarter of the kale seed's diameter? That's how deep you want to plant that seed. That's not very deep, but it's deep enough to put the sun away from it, okay? So corn, plant a little deeper. It's a little bit bigger seed, right? Okay, does that make sense, everyone? All right. Those are the things to getting seeds to start well. Buy the seeds from those companies or find some good ones yourself, and you're going to have a good success. Okay, all those companies have reputable seeds. They're all going to have germination rates on them. Germination rates are a very important thing. If you get a seed packet and it says, you know, germination rate 76%, okay, you better plant a few extras because only 76 are going to germinate. If it says 99, you're doing good. Okay, every year if you have to save seeds and you're going to save some for next year, the germination goes down with whatever type of seed, whatever kind of plant family it is, and how you stored it and how you preserve the seed from year to year. Okay, very important stuff. Okay, that's your main gist on seed starts. Okay, once again, thank you all for coming here. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to come in person, number one, and this cool hybrid thing that we're all getting used to. A huge thanks to the Churro Library. All the librarians here are amazing, every single one of them. The Zooming thing has been cool, huh? Gail, it's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
All right. I also want to thank all my teachers who have taught me and enabled me to teach you, okay? It's not just my 34 years of being in this, 35 years of being in this, but I've had great teachers, okay? Thanks all again for you attending online and in person. And once again, I'd like to dedicate my educational efforts to all sentient beings. May they use this information to create a better community and planet. Okay. All right. Now it's the end. And you're getting Dave's Green certified every day. This, by the way, this picture, my wife is running a marathon or one of her big road races. I can't remember what. And there was rows of porta potties in Boston, like 6 trillion of them. And they're all had this little thing. And I just turned from Roxbury Nursery to Dave's Greens that same year. So I took that picture and it's the closest I have to a logo. Okay. I don't need a logo because I know all my customers because they come to my market and I talk to them and all my chefs. All right. So now we're going to hit questions
I'm trying.
real quick if we can. Once again, I went over time. I'm better than last week. But
All right, hold on a sec. I'm trying to,
you get those
Yeah.
questions. I'll hit these guys.
okay, and just a shout out to Sustainable Cape too.
Oh,
who's,
yes, Sustainable Cape.
collaborating with us on our garden grant, and so.
Yeah, Sustainable Cape. I am a founding member of Sustainable Cape, a phenomenal organization. I gave it the name. Cape stands for Center for Center for Agricultural Preservation and Education. I came up with the acronym, I can't remember. Sustainable Cape, amazing foundation. Stephanie Ryan and Francie Randolph were my co-founders. I'm no longer on the board any longer. But Francie is doing phenomenal work. Incredible. SustainableCape.org has helped this library immensely, and the library has helped Sustainable Cape immensely. And if you've ever seen our children's garden, and also Sustainable Cape runs our Farmer in the School program, where Stephanie Ryan, Farmer Stephanie, they call her, goes to Wellfleet, Truro, and P-Town weekly, mostly a year, and teach the kids, and they garden and grow food. And then they bring it to their cafeteria, where our wonderful cafeteria staff creates the food and the kids get to eat it. So Sustainable Cape does amazing programs. Big shout out to Francie and Stephanie, my co-founders. Okay,
I'm
questions?
trying-
Roberta, I think you were first.
Yeah, why did we have such a phenomenal food year?
A fruit year?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the last couple of years, how were they? Not last year, the years before that.
Terrible.
Terrible, right? What happened in April of that year? Not last year, but the 3 years prior to that, we've had very rainy, cold Aprils, right? Very rainy. The year before last, we had 23 days of rain. Very few days of sun, okay? And cool, right? So what brings us the fruit that you like to eat at your house, because you got some great trees, is the bees. Bees can't fly. They won't fly if it's under 50 degrees. And if it's raining every day and they go and it's even warm and they go to to go get some pollen, okay? The pollen gets wet on their bodies and they don't transfer the pollen, hence creating the fruit that you want to eat. So if you have a rainy April, you're going to have low fruit production, particularly beach plums, as you've probably
Yeah,
seen.
well, great, but I had fruit trees that never had
Yep.
fruit on them.
Yep.
And it was phenomenal. I mean, they were just like peaches. I had.
As our,
Oh, I had.
That's-
Yes,
I had a good bumper crop as well. As the climate's changing, Roberta, we're getting, I've been farming in Truro since 1987, right? So the more I've seen things change here, the April used to be a little bit more, a little rain, a little sun, a little rain, a little sun. That is changing. And that's just what's happening. On my own personal thing, I'm not going to get all climate whatever with people, but I'm telling you that my 35 years of farming here, it's changed. So what I now do, particularly with a tricky crop like I grow persimmons, I don't know if you've ever grown a persimmon, but my wife likes persimmons and my daughter, so I grow them persimmons. But I have to go out and hand pollinate them now on a day that's kind of sunny. Well, there's a lot of tricks to it, and we could talk about that, but hand pollination has helped. So that's why we had a good year. Yeah.
I did half a tree, half a tree, half a tree. It's nothing.
Yeah. Thanks.
Are there any common vegetables that don't grow well here?
You repeat the,
Something that the average person would want to grow?
Corn.
will you repeat the question?
I'm going to repeat the question. Any common vegetables that, say that again? You tell me.
Really don't.
That don't do well here. Any common vegetables that don't do well here on Cape Cod? Corn. Okay. It's just not worth it, in my opinion. Certainly not on a market level. Like there's no locally grown corn on Cape Cod. It doesn't exist. Okay, there are. I'm not saying Tim Ferry does some. There are a few people that doesn't, but it really doesn't exist. So when you drive up to local corn, it's coming from off Cape, most likely the Pioneer Valley Growers Association, but we're not going to get into details. But yes, corn would be one of them.
Something else not to follow. That's good.
I've got nothing.
Alright.
Nothing's coming. Corn. Yeah, corn is it. That's the only one I could think of. That's only coming to my mind. I mean, I've had, particularly that common list we just had, nothing on there. I mean, that's everything. I mean, obviously that had yucca and a few other things on there, but you can grow yucca here too. Sweet potato, it takes some real attention to detail. Okay, so if you just get some sweet potato slips and stick them in the ground at Cape Cod, you're going to get a small harvest. People like Tim Frary at Cape Cod Organic Farm, amazing, one of the nicest organic farms on the Cape. He does a great job at what he does. He's got a system down, and that includes probably black plastic mulch and stuff, and drip irrigation. But his thing's cool because what he does at the end of the season is they have a big gleaning, and all these community organizations and groups come and they dig up all these sweet potatoes, all this excess, and they donate them all to these cool food banks and everything. Like I'm talking like thousands of pounds of sweet potatoes. It's cool.
Wow. Somebody
Okay,
wants to know
anyone else?
about okra, if
Okay.
okra grows around here.
Okra grows great here, phenomenal. Okra's an incredible crop.
Sort of two-part question. The green manure, how do you get the leafy parts into the soil if you're following a no-till practice? And also, what do you do with all the marsh grass that you put on?
The salt marsh hay?
Yeah.
So with salt marsh hay, in the spring, I removed that. I don't remember that from my talk last week. I'll take the salt marsh hay. If I don't have a cover crop on for the winter, I will remove it in this. I'll definitely put salt marsh on top after that. I will remove that salt marsh hay in the spring all the time. I typically tend to just put it in the walkways, right? And then because one of the problems we can have with mulch is that it keeps the soil cool. And I'm trying to warm it up so I can get my tomatoes in first, so I can be the first to bring the tomato to the Turtle Farmers Market, and I can beat Murph and Degree because they're my main competition. All right, so we have this friendly little farming competition here in Truro, and I want to be the first with the zucchini, and I want to be the first with the tomatoes. Some years I win, but honestly, Murph wins most of the time because you get that you get it off there, get that soil warmed up, and that's the key. So I typically just put it to the walkways. If you in your garden, then you can put it back after the tomato plants are planted, and you put it back. Then you put a couple of tomato basils on the sunny side and a couple of arugula on the shade side, or some other living thing. But you can put it back then, right? And it's a little labor intensive. I'm not going to lie, it is, but it's worth it. Particularly in your home garden, you're not doing this for your living. You're just doing it for food and recreation and health and the environment, right? So yeah, I just take it off and then put it back on. But yeah, that's what I do with the salt marsh hay, or any mulch for that matter. Okay, because a lot of people aren't blessed. Like we're blessed. We have salt marsh hay. We're the finest mulch on the planet.
What about eelgrass?
Eelgrass, same thing. Eelgrass is great. I like to use eelgrass a lot. I prefer to just get it in my compost and get all those nutrients and minerals in the compost. Okay, the microorganisms, all the beneficial organisms in there, really love that stuff. But I will use it on my perennial crops, particularly on my flower beds. Okay, and I may remove it a little bit and then put it back a little bit, but mostly on my perennial beds, I just leave it. Believe it or not, if it's not too thick, asparagus and rhubarb will come right through that stuff. Okay, and you had a three-part
Yeah,
question.
green manure, getting the.
Oh, okay. So you do what's called a green chop.
Sorry, what now?
A green chop. So on no-till farms,
Yeah.
we'll flail mow it and we'll chop it, and it's not like you're going to bag it and remove it. Like like the landscaper's going to take the grass away. You flail chop it and you green chop it and let it sit, and then it decays and rots and all that stuff gets in there. The earthworms are going to come up because particularly if you have hairy vetch, all those deep roots go down, and the earthworms will find those little root channels and they'll just come right up from the bottom, and then you're putting all this stuff on the top. This green chop, we call it, right? The hairy vetch, the clover, the alfalfa, whatever it is. And they're going to go up there and eat it all. And then they're going to bring it back down, and then they're going to poop. And it's going to like this amazing shit.
The same would be with like lima bean, the green part of lima.
Yeah. So take your beans, take your fava beans, your lima beans, whatever broad beans you have, chop it, lay it on the ground, let it rot. Let it rot. Okay. And if it's a nice green, if you're really getting into the no-till thing, I want to suggest everyone does that. Learn about things where you grow like you can grow a crop, particularly if you're trying to get rid of weeds, you get a new garden, it's really weedy, grow a crop of like oats, right? Like non-winter hardy oats. Grow them all year long. So you get a nice thick stand of oats. You can harvest the oats and eat them. But then you can either roll it down or just stomp on it, take a rake and smash it a little bit. And it's not going to regrow. It's going to die because it's not cold hardy, right? So it's going to die and it's going to leave a mulch right there. And then in the spring you can plant right through. It's an amazing thing. No-till is really the way to go, in my opinion, particularly for home gardens. But there's a lot to the finesses of which crops and what to do, and a lot of little stuff like that. But it's called a green chop. Just chop it, let it grow. Sometimes I'll put a lawnmower on a garden and just chop it that way. A mulching mower that doesn't show the mulch away, so it keeps it in that area. And I just run through it and chop it up into little pieces, and then the microorganisms can get at it quicker, and so can the earthworms. Okay. Question.
Oh, if I could just say, in regard to the tilling, I have an allotment back in England, and they don't allow tilling at all because of all the seeds going everywhere.
That's so
You
great.
can't, so
And that's in the UK somewhere?
pardon?
Where is that?
Well, mine is in a little part of Oxford,
Okay.
but
In the UK.
most of the allotments over there don't allow.
And are you talking about like a community garden space
Yes.
allotment? Okay.
an allotment.
That is great. And I've been involved with organizations where we created gardens and school gardens and things. And I'm going to add that to my new list of things that all community gardens should have, because I'm actually helping my nephew, and I hope he can tune in someday, Tyler. We want to work. I want to help him get some gardens going. He's a pastor in Indiana. It's Indianapolis. So I'm going to add that to the thing. No till, no rototillers. Because you know what rototillers do? Besides bringing the weed seeds up, they also chop up all the microorganisms and the earthworms, and and particularly the fungal hypha threads. So you have these threads of fungi that are going through that are doing all this amazing work, bringing nutrients to your plant, communicating with the plant. And it's amazing what's going on, right? And then you run the rototiller through there, and you chop up all that fungal mycorrhiza everywhere. It's like it's crazy, and it's hard as a farmer because I've plowed. I can't even tell you how many acres of land I've plowed on big tractors and small tractors and rototillers. I've learned. I'm out of there. I'm done. You know, the last 3 years I'm done. I have a little portion of my farm left to transition over, but it's probably about 20% left. And when that's done, I'm no-till 100%. And a lot of my old gardens I'm turning into asparagus and rhubarb because I'm going into perennial, fields that just, are difficult to work for whatever reason. Asparagus and rhubarb. I could sell a lot of it.
Well, that was their second reason, other than the seeds going everywhere, is that it's sort of like, imagine taking a chainsaw to all of the telephone and cable lines.
That's exactly right. That's a great analogy. I'm going to use that one too. I'm going to start. I'm plagiarizing from you, and I just met you. I don't even know you.
I actually take classes at the Oxford University's Botanic Garden.
Oh, that's cool.
They do every season. They have a different program as well as lectures and what have you. I'm just there really for the dots and the pump and the pints, but I really do good. But actually, my real question was, why do you prefer the sun gold over the other tomatoes? Because I'm in love with your chocolate cherry tomato.
The chocolate tomato is a phenomenal cherry tomato. Number two, sun gold's number one. I like it's a little bit lower acid, okay, which I like a little bit, and it's so that a little bit less acid pulls up a little bit more sweetness. As sweet as the chocolate cherry is, it's still just a little bit more acid, and I like the texture. But as far as growing it goes, you get about a third more yield off the sun gold than you will the chocolate cherries, particularly because I grow the heirloom open pollinated chocolate cherries, which are different than the hybrid ones, which aren't as good, by the way, the hybrid ones. But the sun gold just produces like a phenomenal amount of plants. It's the first one to harvest. It's the last one to harvest. Literally, it's the first tomato we sell, and it's the last tomato we sell. It has a lot of that ability. And in the home garden, that's just, I mean, it's good for me financially because it's how I make my living, but it's also great in your garden because you want to have a long period. If you're going to be dedicating all that space and you're going to be doing all that stuff in the soil and trying to keep the bugs and the diseases off, you want it to be a long season. And it's extremely disease resistant. I mean, I'll have blight everywhere, not as much as I used to, but I'll have blight, you know, in various places, you know, and various types of fungal stuff and viruses. Some will just push right out through it. If everyone's dying around them, some will just keep on going. And that's a hybridization thing.
We had a couple questions from people. It's a little bit hard because one person wrote at 4:38. So can you remember what we were talking about then?
Nope.
They said, what about perennials and herbs that come back? My chives, thyme, sorrel, mint family, basil.
Got it. Yeah, got it. Well, basil's not a perennial, but same thing with the herbs. A lot of those herbs can be, they're not really, like I said earlier, with Roberta's question, I think it was, or someone's question. Basil is not, a lot of those herbs, those annual herbs aren't really too pest and disease ridden. So they're not, you know, and they kind of just are shallow feeders, medium feeders. They're not real, like gonna get a lot of, aside from parsley, but they're not gonna really do a lot of mining of nutrients and bring it up to the benefit of the other crops to follow it. Perennial crops, like I said at the end of my talk, really should have either its own garden or its own section of your rotation that you're committing it to for 3 years. So maybe you take my 5-year plan and you have a sixth bed, right, as your perennial stuff, and leave that there for a while. And then when that's over and like the strawberries or whatever perennial, it starts to fade and wind down, then you can hit it with another a green manure crop to build up the soil from there. So yeah, that's how I'd handle that.
So, and then do you plant seeds indoors in pots or right into the garden in the spring? I guess they mean you personally.
Both. It depends on the crop. But I used to always do string beans, direct seed. That in the field is called direct seed. Inside it's just called transplanting, I guess. Or direct seeding is outdoors. Direct seeding crops. I used to do my string beans that way. And then my friend Stephanie started transplanting them and growing them for sale for people in pots. And I started to see how great it was working. And I was getting, so I started doing that. And when you transplant something that you started inside, you have a lot more control over the pests and diseases that would attack a baby plant or a seed. So I would get a better stand. I'd get more production out of if I transplant it. That being said, certain things like radishes, I'm going to direct seed, right into the ground. There's a few things. I used to direct seed spinach all the time. I don't do that anymore. I transplant spinach now. What else do I know? In carrots, I'm still direct seeding carrots. You can't, if you transplant carrots, they do really great, but it's hard to grow for me in my greenhouse or you in your house, because if that taproot isn't straight and it gets twisted, it can deform it to the point where it's unedible, or that it won't grow very well, or it can do what's called girdling. It can girdle itself, so you can do root crops like celeriac and a few things, but you got to be really careful to make sure that you have a deep pot that you're transplanting the seeds, that you're growing the seeds in, so it can handle, so it's kind of a long, narrow pot. And then when you're transplanting it in the ground, you want to make sure that that hole you have is really deep and that you put it in nice and straight, and you're very careful closing it in. So it's not really, in my opinion, it's not worth it, but it can be done.
I think that's all the questions from this side. I don't know if anybody else here has any more.
Why did fathers do so well this year?
Fathers are a little bit of, can be a little tricky with your watering. Do you have how do you water your garden?
I didn't do this.
Okay.
I was trying to buy it all I could, and it was none to buy.
Oh, that's because no one's growing them. My fava crop was amazing.
Stephanie said she couldn't grow them this year, so she wasn't selling them.
I don't know why she didn't do it. I mean,
But you have?
I had an amazing fava crop. Yeah, it was great. It was really good. Yeah. I mean, the favas are a little tricky. First off, you have to inoculate the seed. You got to get that rhizobia specific for broad beans, Because there's one for peas, one for beans, string bean, see, one for running bean, you need this, because, and if a company like Johnny's or any of those companies up there is going to sell you the inoculant that's appropriate for those things. So you really have to inoculate it. That's super key, because those rhizobia do so much. And they also help with the exudate production. There's so much that goes on with those bacteria. And watering deeply, but not as often. Do you know what I mean by that? So giving it a nice, good, deep soak, but then backing off a little bit. So in a situation, like on my farm and on the way Stephanie grows too, is we use drip irrigation. So, and when you're doing a whole field like Stephanie's doing, and I'm doing, you can't just turn on that one extra long and then turn it off shorter, and then where the lettuce and everyone else needs a certain amount of water, but then you're not going to water the fava beans. So in some respects, you want your fava beans kind of set up on its own water schedule. But I have really good luck with deep, heavy watering, and then letting the plant stretch and reach and start to look for more water, that it gets more root growth. If you keep watering something like, constantly, which you need to do for tomatoes, don't get me wrong, but for most crops, if you just keep watering a little bit all the time, it makes the plants kind of lazy. And the roots are like, I don't have to go over there where the water is, because they're giving me water right here, so I don't have to go out there. But you want your roots to go out there. You want to encourage them by having good soil, food web. If you have good soil, you're going to help them that way. You want to encourage that roots to stretch out a little bit and go for stuff. And in the process, when they're doing that, they're also going to get the nutrients that are farther away, that they're not accessing close by. So the favas can really dig down deep and go and get those nutrients. But if they have all the water they need, they're going to be like, I don't really need to go down there. I'll just hang out here, and I'll give you half the production you could get.
Would that be true also for Balati beans and
For what kind of beans?
Balati beans
And
limas?
definitely, most of the broad beans are going to be that way. Yeah, they're going to be exactly the same. Those long kind of taproot beans.
So that doesn't stress out the plant by not watering, when it's sitting there.
I didn't say I'm not saying get to perma-wilt. Because the only time you're going to hurt a plant with lack of water is if you get to perma-wilt and wilting. Okay, wilting breaks down cell walls, and it takes a lot of repair time to come back. And you probably see something die back, and then it looks like crap, and then a few weeks later it's looking good again, right? So you don't want to get to that point. I didn't mean to let it dry down that much. I mean, give it a good soak, and then as opposed to like a lot of us that conventionally grow, will water our beds drip irrigation on an everyday basis. Like every morning at 3 in the morning, boom, the fields get water. So they have time to dry out before the sun comes down. But with the fava bean type thing, and a lot of other crops too, there are others too, of a lot of root crops, I give them a good soak, and then I hold off for 3 or 4 days. If it's super hot and dry, then I might, I gotta go change a little bit, but just let it go for a little bit. You never want to start to see leaves wilting. As soon as you see that, you're in trouble. There's metabolic processes going on in the structure of the plant that's already being harmed.
A good soak is like an inch.
More, yeah,
2.
maybe 4. When I test for water, particularly when I'm setting up new drip irrigation systems, everyone's like, yeah, I water my lawn. I put my sprinkler on for 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, did you go in the soil and touch and see what it looks like? And if you go home and do that, you're going to see that you're probably underwatering your plants. Go in 8 to 10 inches, and then reach down in there 8 to 10 inches, and then does it feel moist? Does it feel good down there? That's when you know you've watered enough. And the irrigation companies, the landscapers, these people don't know about that stuff. They're just like, yeah, put it on for 20 minutes every day. They put on their special timers or fancy stuff and whatever. They don't water enough. And then it goes on when it's raining. So, I mean, it's like, it's kind of, get the job done, make the money, get out. And then we don't really, landscaper, for the most part, know a lot of things about design and garden things, but not necessarily about water or fertility sometimes. All right, anyone? That's it. It's 5:30, so we should get going. And I have a date.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
so
Thanks all for
it's,
coming.
not next
yeah.
week. It's not
Elliot
next week.
Coleman. Elliot Coleman.
Oh, and we have a couple DVDs, Elliot Coleman DVDs in the collection as well.
Cool.
And next week's not a class, but the week after.
Correct. Next week, you can tune in to my radio show at WMR at 5 o'clock.
There you go.